Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at Hebrews chapter 11 in our continuing study of the general epistles. Hebrews 10:39, the last verse of the previous chapter, but we are not of those who shrink back to destruction, but of those who have faith to the preserving or saving of the soul. And that brings up the question, how are you saved? Well, you're saved by faith. Well, what does that look like? What does faith look like? And chapter 11 is going to give us examples, pictures of faith. Hebrews 11, beginning in verse 1. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Notice that there is an unseen quality about faith. If I can see something, that's not faith that it's there. I'm just seeing it. I'm going by my experience, my senses. Faith is when I cannot see. It's the conviction of those things not seen. It's the assurance of things hoped for. Hope is faith in the future tense. Hope is that faith that I can't see. Verse 2, for by it the men of old gained approval. And in just a moment we're going to start looking at those men of old and the approval that they gained. But first we make this personal. Verse 3, by faith we understand that the worlds, or ages if you want to translate it that way, but that the worlds were prepared by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things which are visible. You see, God is not visible. He's the invisible God. But the invisible God has created things that are seen, like the earth. And so what is seen, like the earth, wasn't made out of other things that you see. It was made out of that which you cannot see. It was made at the hands of God. Now, we're treated now to a number of examples of faith. First, it was by faith that Abel offered up a better sacrifice. It was by faith that Enoch was taken up. Remember, he walked with God, so that he was not, because God took him. By faith, Noah prepared an ark and was delivered. By faith, Abraham obeyed by going out. Notice that each one did something. There was an action that was brought about by their faith. It's not just that they had faith and their faith led to inaction. No, their faith led to an action that demonstrated their faith. By faith, Abraham, he went out and he lived as an alien, some might say an illegal alien, but he went to a land that wasn't his own. By faith, Sarah received the ability to conceive. By faith, Abraham offered up Isaac. That was an act of faith. It was by faith that Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau. It was by faith that Jacob blessed each of the sons of Joseph. It's interesting to note that all the things that Jacob did in his life, the one thing that's mentioned here at the end of his life, when he leaned upon his staff as a very, very old man, and he gave a blessing to each one of his sons, that was by faith. It was by faith that Joseph gave orders concerning his bones. He said, when he told the Israelites as they were in Egypt, when you leave Egypt, and it was going to be 400 years before they would leave, make sure you take my bones with you. It was by faith that Moses was hidden for 3 months by his parents to save his life. It was by faith that Moses chose to endure ill treatment with the people of God, where he decided, no, I will be identified as an Israelite rather than as an Egyptian, where he'd been brought up as an Egyptian. It was by faith that he cast his lot with the Israelites. It was by faith that he left Egypt. It was by faith that he kept the Passover. The Israelites passed through the Red Sea by faith. The walls of Jericho fell down by faith, by the faith of the Israelites. Rahab welcomed the spies in peace. By faith, she did that. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 32, and what more shall I say? For time will fail me if I tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets. Notice these were not all necessarily good people, but they were all people that had faith in God. Verse 33, who by faith conquered kingdoms, performed acts of righteousness, obtained promises, shut the mouth of lions. Verse 34, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, from weakness were made strong, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight. They did all those things, not because they were so big and strong, but by faith. Faith was the ingredient that brought all of these things to pass. Verse 35, women received back their dead by resurrection. This is all Old Testament stories. And others were tortured, not accepting their release, so that they might obtain a better resurrection. And others experienced mockings. Notice not everyone was saved alive. Some were killed. Verse 36, and others experienced mockings and scourgings, yes, also chains and imprisonments. And he mentions that because his readers are also on the verge of beginning to experience both loss of property and even loss of freedom and maybe even death. You see, they are facing coming persecution. And so they're being reminded, those that went before you also faced persecution. Verse 37, they were stoned, they were sawn in two, they were tempted, they were put to death with the sword, they went about in sheepskins, in goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, ill-treated, men of whom the world was not worthy, wandering in deserts and mountains and caves and holes in the ground. You see the Old Testament believers in all sorts of predicaments. Verse 39, and all these, having gained approval through there it is again, through their faith, did not receive what was promised. Notice there was a promise there, but they didn't receive the promise. Why? Verse 40, because God has provided something better for, not just for them, not for Old Testament saints, for us, so that apart from us, they would not be made perfect. You see, we don't have a picture here of Old Testament Israel and then New Testament church, and never the twain shall meet. Rather, there's a connection here so that apart from us, they would not be made perfect.